So for our bonus content, we were going to talk about a few different companies, and if you want to add any more companies, I'll give you my take on what those companies think of the equivalent of design fiction and how that plugs in to the experience there. And the caveat I want to give you is I have no design training whatsoever. I'm an engineer. I studied computer science. I am just very observant. I wanted to be a writer, so I learned to be very observant about how people talk about these things. And so very much I come in as a novice for any of these things, and I learn, and I often stumble into things just by trying them. And then some things work and some things don't. So here's what I've seen in all these companies and the projects that I worked on. Some of them, I'll tell you the names of the projects, and it'll make sense. So um, at Microsoft, the HoloLens started with this very interesting question. The executives, the Don Matrick kind of person in the company, came to my boss at the time and said, whoever was designing the next generation Xbox blew it, and all they said was it's 10x more than the current one. I want your team to go envision the future, but come back with something that scares us. So their version of design fiction was, it doesn't have to be practical, but we want something that blows our mind. So don't be conventional. Don't just tell us what we already know. And that's where we came up with AR as the thing to do. We had free license to think outside the box, literally the Xbox in this case, and come up with the peripheral. And it was not popular because we just got rid of the controller with the Kinect. We're gonna ship this product that is gonna have no controllers in your hand whatsoever. We're gonna put something on your face. Well, yeah, it's the only way to do it right now. We can't do holodecks yet. So that's where we landed, and it was purely as an exercise in what could we do that would be different and unique and no one else would do it. And we didn't know that Google was just starting Glass around the same time, or Rony was starting Magic Leap around the same time. Those were still secret projects, just like ours was. So it felt like it was, all of us had the same sense in all these companies that we were starting something that no one else was doing, and it was brand new. So that was Microsoft. And the thing about Microsoft is it wasn't a very design-led company. It was very much a PM-led company. It was like, what is our next product? What is our next feature? So this was an exception, I think, to that rule. So then you have Amazon, and Amazon's version of design fiction is we're going to write a press release from the future. So every project starts when they call it thinking. What do they call it? Working backwards, right? So you want to start with the end result, which is the press release that describes the product that you just launched. And so it's very much like what you're talking about with the with your revenues from the future, or your annual report from the future. But it's very tailored, just a couple of paragraphs about your product and how do people receive it. You even have quotes in those press releases of, Joe Average says, oh, I love this because, and they really want to know what the reason is. Why would somebody love this? That has to be part of that press release. And their culture is very much written, so it would never be a visual artifact or a smell or anything else like that, because they're so verbal, and it's all about the narrative form. Everything is almost no imagery whatsoever, unless it's a design UI document. It will never have imagery. And Apple is the opposite of that. They want to envision the future, but they want to see it. Everything is visual. They literally use Keynote, their equivalent of PowerPoint, to depict the future of their own products. And the goal at Amazon was to open people's imagination so that everybody, executives and everybody else, was on the same page, in this case literally, about what the product might look like, and they could debate it. At Apple, they're very intuitive, right? It's a very collaborative culture. I'm sure it was even when Steve Jobs was leading it, that it's very much not top down in terms of everyone, here's what you must build, but everybody's is having a conversation with everybody else about what the right thing to build is. So the visual depictions are tools that they use to help everybody align on the same idea at the same time and the same thought. But what we did a little bit differently, and they do tons of prototyping as well, but what we needed to do to start the Apple Vision Pro, because it started mostly in an engineering org, we had to tell stories about the future as well. So how do you tell a story about something that doesn't exist? And there's no equivalent product out there that you can use to do it. So what we did is we built demos. So these could be thought of as demos from the future. And the same things that you said about the quality of the iteration of the art, it doesn't matter so much. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's not about, in fact, the more perfect you make the art, the worse it's going to play, because people are going to notice where it's not perfect. But if you make it crude in every way, except emotionally, except viscerally, what you want to do is the designers come in and try this thing. You want to create an emotion, a feeling in them, of how a future customer might feel in using this product or this feature. And that emotion needs to be one of excitement, of magic. They'd use the word a lot of, can you create the feeling of magic in somebody so that they're inspired? And if you can't, then the demo is not worth it. It's not proving anything. But if you can, then you got something. And the most important thing is, as you iterate and improve it, never kill the magic. If you do
Mm,
something and it diminishes the magic, you made a mistake. Go back and go to where it was magical and then build from there. Because throughout the entire process, and I didn't see all the process. I don't work in the design studios or anything. So I don't see what they do to come up with the magic of how do you make the UI perfect, which they tend to do when they work on this. What I worked on was, how do we just get everybody inspired about, for
mm,
example, eye gaze, like as a new input mechanism? How do we get everybody to believe that it's both possible, plausible, and good and magical? And you do that through this demo, which is a kind of design fiction that isn't the real product. It isn't the thing that you want to see, but it's just something that you kind of gets you excited and you believe in it. So
yeah.
there's 3 or 4 different examples of how this thing plays out in at least my experience. What do you, if we want to add to that, other companies as well as you've seen?
Yeah, well, you've got more experience in the commercial world, and but I think those examples are they're resonant because it comes down to the last one you referred to is like the idiom of magic was used, and I think that's powerful and uh, it gives a certain resonance because it also has this characteristic. It's like, well, I don't know what that is, but it's a thing, something, and that allows imagination to enter into that feeling and that sense in that conversation because no one, accepting that there's a mechanic to the typical, the routine, the hygienic idea of magic. um, that's what it's meant to do. It's meant to evoke this sense of wonder, like, wow, that just happened from another world. And when I was there, one bookstore I go to, and it's this beautiful kind of, suitably curmudgeonly kind of guy behind the counter, but they have these it's like all like basically used books, but they're all like highly curated, meaning that like each one is put in like a library wrap, that kind of like, so it's they're nice and they're not nothing exclusive about. They're not like first editions. But there's one book I kept coming across. I finally had to get it, um, and it's called the Amateur Magician's Handbook,
Nice.
Oh, yes,
fourth
yes,
fourth
yes.
edition. So it's like, a big thing, and it's got this powerful, the what it evokes from me is like, um, it's a handbook. It's not just it's a handbook, and it's got features new sections on shows for children. It's very prescriptive, and it says more than 200 illustrations, newly revised and expanded. And the thing that was fascinating for me was like that tension between this ineffable thing that you can't describe. It's a power that exists, that, by birth or genetics or whatever, like magic, like I'm talking fantasy level magic. And then this other side, so that's the imagination. That's what all the kids want to believe and feel and think. Even as adults, we want to, we can
We
hold on
pay
to
for
that.
that.
Like,
We pay money to feel that sense of magic whenever we
yeah,
can, even
Wonderland
when
that
we
you
know
talk
it's
about.
fake,
Yeah.
right?
even when we
Yeah.
know it's fake. It's fake. There are always some people who are kind of like, who are looking to see how it happened. But I remember I was exposed to like close in magic at a cocktail party. Someone had done this wonderful job of hiring a magician who's like literally walking over to you and
Yeah.
doing little tricks. And it's that sense of wonder, and I think that's
Exactly.
the magic. So I want people to feel something out of this. It can't just be, the most RAM. It can't be the most, no one wants to hear. I mean, you know, we want to hear about the resolution of the display, but most people are like, whatever. Does
Yeah.
it let me, is it Super Mario Kart is cooler than before kind of thing? And so playing around with that idiom, and it sounds like all those different ways are people were just trying to find the way to make our imagination make sense. Like we all have this, maybe a strong feeling like, "Oh, I got this great idea for this thing, man. How am I going to sell this? How's this going to get through?" And it might be a cockamamie idea. It might be like, I don't know, that doesn't really sound that great. But we still have that feeling like, I think this is great. And so we do that beautiful thing, like when someone, as long as someone doesn't interrupt or dispute or do the thing that bad parenting does, which is like, stop that. Stop imagining, stop
Right.
screwing around. Or even the thing, the story of, I don't, I don't think this happened to me, but it's like you do a drawing when you're a kid. I'm sure this didn't happen. You do a drawing, and your parents are like, "Oh my God, look at this! This is beautiful." And to them, and at very many levels, it is. And then you do that same drawing, but you do it on the new hardwood floors in crayon.
Hmm.
And then you're told, stop that. That's
Yeah.
wrong. And you're like, what do you mean when I did it over there? This is more permanent. This will always be here.
Yeah.
And that's not what the kid's thinking. The kid's just bawling their eyes out and suddenly thinking like, well, that's it for the artist thing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be a accountant. I'll show you.
Now just imagine the world where, the world of AR where you can be creative but not destroy the furniture, right?
Yeah,
It's going to open up all sorts of possibilities that parents won't have to tell us
No
no
more
because
magic
they're worried.
eraser.
No more magic. It's you can do anything you want now as many times as you want and share it with as many people as you want. So that's got to be more magical than the old crayon on the hardwood floor, right?
yeah.
Absolutely. I see on your shelf, you've got a bright pink book next to you by Bruce Mao.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in my pre-augmented life, I worked for Bruce Mao. I had the great pleasure
Oh
of
wow.
learning from. Yeah. So I worked on a project called Massive Change,
Sure.
the
That
future of
one's
global
back there.
design. You got it.
It's
Yeah.
back there.
Thank
Yeah.
you. So I led this project. It was back in 2002. And it was really amazing working
Mm,
with Bruce at the design studio. And so Massive Change, the subtitle was The Future of Global Design. And so it was a book, as you know, published with Phaidon Press. It was a radio program. It was a 20,000 square foot exhibition. It was a massive project. And, this was super early, like 2002. And Bruce was just an absolute genius talking about sustainability and, thinking about like, well, what does the future of design look like? And back then the conversation was heavily around graphic design, book design, and Bruce himself was doing a lot of book design and graphic design. And so he said, no, the future of design is the design of sustainable transportation. The future of design is the design of information, the
mm,
design of urban design, all these things. And so we had these 12 economies that we kind of imagined the future of. And at the same time, I mean, this was a massive project. We had a school in the studio, house in the studio, called the Institute Without Boundaries, and their project was to work on massive change. And so one of the things that we did with the school, so I was project lead on massive change, and then I was also program coordinator for this school. So I was wearing all these different hats. And one of the projects that we did was create these massive statements. It was a manifesto project. So for each of these different economies, ranging from transportation to energy to new materials, we came up with bold statements of what we wanted to, as a collective society, solve. And I think, one of them was, we will enable sustainable mobility. I've got some of them here. What were some of them? We will build a global mind. We will bring energy to the entire world. And so, looking back of reading through your book, the manual design fiction, of what are the tools at hand, right? So what we did was we actually made posters of these
mm.
statements,
Yeah.
just like going into Word or whatever it was, or maybe we got fancy in Illustrator or something, right? And we kind of plastered these big statements out in the world on telephone poles, and we photographed them, and those were
Mm-hmm.
kind of like our artifacts from
Mm-hmm.
the future, and this kind of Avi, to your point about kind of these like analog methods, these quick and dirty approaches. So that was a fantastic project to be a part of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's someone I don't know him only through his books for what you described, but being finding if they're well, this is probably not true, but maybe, but just at the core, it's like the ability to sense make and translate.
Exactly.
Being able to
Exactly.
articulate. Again, back to the imagination. It's like, but someone says like, what's the future of design? And a Bruce Mao type character tells you something unexpected, but then makes it
Exactly.
make sense to you, even
Mm,
if you're like, or, to the HoloLens example,
yeah.
who knows what they were expecting on the other side of the table. They're like, wow us. They might have been like, well, they weren't thinking this, but it's like, um, they're going to figure out what new colors we should do it in. That's what they're going to figure out. That's going to be amazing. I can't wait to see that. And you're not expecting, but then the hard work is that we all know from the experiences that we've had here right now is doing the work to of doing the sense making. How do you make it make sense to someone, right? Neil Stevenson helps you make sense of his imagination through very prolific, sometimes long-winded stories.
Yeah.
a whatever whatever is represented by Apple design helps you make sense of possibility in the world through these exquisite, covetable objects. Bruce Mao, communication design at a certain level, saying
Yeah,
like, I'm going to help you tell a story. I'm going to put it up in the world and put it in this way that you wouldn't expect. Uh,
exactly. Exactly.
um,
That's right. And
Yeah.
it's all fundamentally storytelling, right? There are
yeah,
different forms of it. Some are more narrative, some are more visual, but a story takes you on a journey. And through the course of the journey, you go through a transformation, the characters as well as the reader. And by the time you come out of it, you've somewhat aligned. You've somewhat communicated something that was in the author's mind that is now in the audience's mind. And that's to
Exactly.
me the fundamental quality of all storytelling. And if you want to communicate with people, if you want to convince them or build things together, you have to be able to master storytelling.
yeah.
As the
So the one caveat I would add, so you're absolutely right, is what I'm trying to do, and it's a language, but it is important. It's like if I stop saying story and start saying sense making,
Mm.
then I've opened the route. And it's just that thing. It's like totally understandable. Very quickly, people go from story to novel. And if you tell them like, actually, what I want to do is I want to create a like a prototype industrial designed object that could be the future of video games, they'd be like, that's not storytelling. Like you just did a bunch of industrial design. Well, okay, cool. Granted, I get what you're saying. Technically speaking, or if we're very specific and very precise, industrial design is a form of storytelling. You could say like I had an idea and I materialized it in this physical form because that's what I'm good at. I'm better at that than I'll leave the novels to Neil and Bruce and Steven. They can do that. Same thing. It's like if someone said to you, it'd be a very rare person. You could say, hey, your brief is to help me, is to show me a superlative user interface, your guy at Apple, superlative user interface. And probably without even thinking twice, they can be like, let me call up that one guy. I know one of the guys here at Apple in Culver City who's master at making those keynotes. Sometimes he laments it.
yeah,
Um, but they're gonna call up the ringer. Like if I can get on his list, I'll solve this. They're not gonna call up uh, someone who's great at making a little film. They might. I don't know what goes on in Apple, but they're not gonna say like, hey, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna commission a story. I'm gonna call Bruce Sterling. I'm gonna give him an exceptional fee to write me a story about a superlative user interface because it's gonna land on someone's desk and be like, what's this?
Exactly.
Where's my keynote? So there's
yeah,
the expectations, and so that's why it's a little bit, it's kind of it's pedantic to say it's all about, you need to be able to help make sense of things. You need to be able to
yeah.
make sense of the ideas in your head. Say where I think we're saying the same thing. I'm just
The
building on it.
words, if that at a word level, storytelling is not a good thing because it's using the word telling, and you don't want to tell, you want to show,
Hmm.
right? So
Right.
that first, right off the bat, it's the wrong words for the concept, right?
What
And
what's the word Hitchcock uses? MacGuffin? Is that the one
His
too?
MacGuffin,
MacGuffin,
the MacGuffin,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
the
and
object that, yeah,
The
it's just a
object,
thing.
exactly. Yeah.
and the second is you're talking about the result. The result of what I called storytelling is sense making. And so why don't we talk about the result? It's not the process as much that matters. It does if you're trying to teach it or explain it in a book, but the end result, why you would want to do it, is that you want people to make sense of
Mm.
the similar idea. And the word communication is too broad and too overloaded to use that. So you're trying to use something narrower that people will still get, but it means the same thing. Ultimately,
Yeah,
you're trying to create a resonance of information in people's minds so that I have an idea, I say something, and you have an idea, and there's some connection between those ideas. They're not just totally random,
yeah.
and vice versa. And that conversation that happens in communication is exactly what we're talking about. I take your points about storytelling. I think that it is unfortunate that it's understood through those words because the words are not the right words
Yeah.
to really describe it.
It's also been a beautiful challenge in design fiction being called design fiction because it's got fiction, and just because of what we understand fiction to be, it really goes to like, hey, I did a piece of design fiction. Someone hands you like 3 pages of typewritten prose, and you're kind of like, I don't know what it. And so then you try all different things, and I love this. I love the challenge of trying to communicate what it is and how it operates. And I don't feel like aggravated by it, but it's like I tried the 2 other ways that I think that seem to resonate. One is imagine that you're an archaeologist, but rather than digging into the past, you're digging into the future. So in the mode of an archaeologist, what can you dig up? You could, say like, well, I found this paper story, but it's like, okay, but you didn't write it. Someone wrote it, and why? What was the world that? But usually it's like, I found a shard of pottery. Good. Let's try to unearth this. Or the other one is the forensic detective. Like a forensic detective arrives at a crime scene, and they're not like, oh, I got it. I know who did it. They're kind of, unless you're Columbo, but you're like, huh, all right, there's a drag mark there. It looks like this got that normally wouldn't be there. I see a blood splatter, and there are two shell casings. And now over the next, 52 minutes, we're going to solve this crime together.
Yeah.
And you're going to see how it goes. So it's like, you don't know. And that's that question. You start with a question, or something that allows someone to just be like, I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
what do you think? And then the conversation happens, and then you're starting to build ideas together.
Yeah, I mean, going back to like the the early part where we talked about the audience filling in the blanks. So I love that as a provocation to then just have your imagination kind of fill in those missing pieces and create that sorry, I almost used the word story, bad word, but to continue to question and to imagine. So love that.
Yeah.